play. And another foul on board. His third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen. Izzo's dying for a moving screen.
It's that dreaded moving screen.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart, Hoops. Dylan, it is Wednesday, February 10th. Michigan State coming off a dub against Penn State. Michigan, if things go as expected, will return to the court on Sunday, right?
Sunday afternoon
against Wisconsin. Michigan State has Iowa this weekend, so a lot going on here. Quick plugs for our respective sites for the folks. Over at The Athletic, I wrote on Marcus Bingham last night. Wrote a little golf this weekend. Wrote a little Big Ten. Scheduling, postseason, all of the issues bubbling on the surface. Wrote that last week. Dylan, you did.
I really appreciated tweeting out the Jordan Spieth story directly in the middle of the Super Bowl. Just what everyone wants to see.
I mean, well, anyone who didn't care, that game sucked, did it not?
It did.
So read about some Jordan Spieth.
All right. Hope that strategy worked well for you. At least we know that
judging by the numbers, it didn't work.
Over at Hoops, we have a Big Ten story. I did a bunch of power rankings and analytics on all the teams. Kind of came up with some interesting
shade
stuff.
At your boy.
Threw some shade at Brendan in there.
Man.
Just had to do it. And then we're going to have a bunch of content leading back up to Michigan actually playing games. It's been a long 3 weeks to come up with Michigan basketball content when all we've seen is the team ice fishing. But anyways, we will have some thoughts on kind of where Michigan stands now, what might be an issue moving forward, things like that, kind of what to expect. That should be up on the site either today or tomorrow. And then we'll finally have a game this weekend. Been a long time.
What do you think of the standing desk move I've got going here?
You were making me nervous. You keep swaying a little bit. I was like, what happened over here?
Trying to stay on my feet this morning.
It's going to create some audio issues, I feel like, with all this movement. You already move a lot to begin with, and now you're going to be talking over here, talking over there. It's going to be a full, immersive experience for the listener.
I'll try to keep it centered.
All right.
But, you get into February. This is when you start getting fat, right? Dead of winter. I'm not doing anything. So I'm trying to stay on my feet a little bit in addition to some workouts.
So do you have one of the desks that goes like up and down, or do you?
No, I'm using
bar.
I'm using the bar that's on my kitchen.
It's a comfort zone for you.
It is very much so. Elbows up. All right, let's get into Michigan State. An ugly ass game last night, but at this point, right, for Michigan State, it's just winning whatever you can, however you can do it. Obviously not out of it this year. Like, things can happen. This team can piece together some wins. It can work itself back into the NCAA tournament picture. So between that and building some positives for next year and this offseason, things like that, this season is not a wash. There are still things that need to happen here. So anything to take away from last night's game?
Yeah, I mean, and you look, when you lose 4 games in a row, you can't take a 2-game winning streak for granted, right? Like, the season could have easily imploded, and like the Nebraska game wasn't pretty, the Penn State game wasn't pretty, but you go and you figure out a way to win and you get to the next game. I mean, that's basically where Michigan State is this year. I think you have to give them a lot of credit for what appears to be addressing the defense, right? Like, this is a way that Michigan State can win games. If you can just defend your ass off, really muck up the game, make it ugly, make it slow. I mean, Michigan State doesn't really have the horsepower to win shootouts. So if they can defend like this, and I think, look, Nebraska, Penn State, those are 2 good defensive performances. The way Michigan State played defense in the last 3 minutes of that Penn State game was really impressive. Penn State couldn't run anything, and that's what you needed to win the game. And I think that to find that at this point in the season says something, and it says that this team still has at least a little bit of life in it, I would say. Yeah,
and something worth remembering out of last night's game, I feel like because of what happened to Penn State in the preseason, right, getting rid of Chambers and the year kind of nothing was really expected from them as it was, and that's certainly how the year started. But like, it's not a bad team. Like Penn State was actually playing for important stuff last night. That was a big game for them in terms of their own NCAA tournament conversation. They're really good in the metrics. They're like a top 30 team on Ken Palm going into last night. Their net rating's good. Their strength of schedule is best in the country. Like that wasn't, and like Penn State can score the ball. They have put up points on teams. They put up 81 on Wisconsin earlier this year. They put up 79 on Ohio State. It's obviously a lot of bad shots whether they go in or not, but holding Penn State to 58 and winning a game like that was, I agree with you. It's something to build on, and it's at least a way to identify how to win games, which has been something completely out of grasp for Michigan State.
Yeah, I mean, Penn State is the best team in the country with a losing record. I also think that they are probably screwed for making the NCAA tournament now. I mean, you look, they lost at Seton Hall game in overtime. They lost at Indiana in overtime. They lost close to Ohio State. Now they lost this game.
The Michigan game, they played Michigan as well as anybody there for a while.
So I think they're really good, and they're going to be a pain to play against, but there's just too much for them to make up at this point to actually make the tournament, I'd say. So they're just going to be a pain in the ass for everyone else, because you wouldn't be surprised to see them beat teams like Iowa, Purdue, Minnesota that might have a better chance to make the tournament. So it is a good win. It's also, they're just going to be that team that is in the top 30 in Ken Palm, and probably like Big 12 fans are like, what the hell? This is bullshit. Why Ken Palm's rigged because Penn State's 30th, but they're good and they're tough. They also they don't have a lot of ways to play. They can throw the ball into John Hara and he can do his thing, which worked really well against Michigan State. But then the guards, they just all kind of put their head down and try to drive to the basket or shoot pull-up jumper. So it's a defendable team, but I think Michigan State deserves a lot of credit. I think it was a great adjustment to go with Watts and Bingham in there down the stretch and take out Lawyer and Hauser. That really keyed the defensive shutdown in those last 3 minutes where Penn State didn't score, I believe, or didn't make a basket at the very least.
Right. Yeah, but like going into last night, if Penn State had won, I was going to write, Penn State, like, is Jim Ferry about to make Penn State an NCAA tournament team? Because if they won this game, they have Nebraska next. That was about to put them back at, or that would put them at over 500 for the year. That would have put them at 7 and, wait, 6
it would have been
8-8. Or sorry, 8-8 in the league.
5-7 in the league.
8-8 overall. No, they would have been 6-7 in the league if they beat Nebraska. And positive momentum and for a team that nobody expected anything from. So I wrote Marcus Bingham this morning. You have been on the Bingham train, at least as far as saying that he just needs to get the bulk minutes at the 5 because he probably gives them the most upside. I wonder, is this, I mean, he's not lighting the world on fire by any means, but I feel like they're at least just acknowledging the fact of kind of what you've been saying. Like, this just has to be, you got to just let him go here and give him some minutes. He got 18 minutes last night. That was his second most of the season. Like, I wonder, is it going to be the same against Iowa, or is he just going to get buried by, Luka Garza a couple times, and then they just pull the plug and suddenly he plays 6 minutes again, right? That's been the story of his last 2 years.
Yeah, and I mean, Iowa's tough. He played 11 minutes in that first game and fouled out. So, you can't really judge how much a big man plays against Iowa because Garza's just going to draw fouls. I just think Bingham is the best defensive big on the roster. And if this team is going to figure out how to win, 5 more games or whatever they need to try to have an NCAA tournament argument, I think it has to start with defense, right? What are you getting from a Julius Marble, the Thomas Kithier? I don't see the upside offensively. They're not going to turn you into this shit-kicking offensive team that's just running up and down, scoring in the post. Right. I think Bingham gives you the most chance of a rim protector, and obviously he's rough around the edges. He hasn't ever – 18 minutes, he said it was the second most he's played all year. You're not going to put him out there for 30 minutes, but I think you have to ride him in he started the last 3 games. I think that's a step in the right direction. I think he's playing more minutes while starting. That shows he's gaining trust, at least to an extent.
Yeah, and I mean, even at the same time, though, the last game, right, against Nebraska, had a really nice first half. Then he jacks that 3-pointer 30 seconds into the second half, right? The whole sideline. You just see all the coaches throw their arms in the air, basically in unison, and out he goes. Then he plays 6 minutes that half. Whereas the way he played in the first half, it warranted playing, even more than he did in the first half. So that's kind of the way it is with Marcus. But I remembered in working on the story, I remembered Izzo saying this offseason, this is a make or break year for Marcus Bingham. Well, you have 8, 9, 10, 11 games left. Like, this kind of feels like it's it for, like, if it's more of the same, right? These last 10 games, then I feel like you're kind of putting your arms up and saying, is this really ever going to come together for this guy at this place? So to his credit, he's ridden it out, and nothing has obviously gone as planned. He was so highly touted coming in, and he was so young. Like, he's 20. He doesn't turn 21 until July. And he's a junior. So, like, he's basically the same age as Michigan State's sophomore class. He's the same age as A.J. Hoggard. It's just, he should have redshirted his freshman year. That never happened. And everything has just kind of been behind schedule for him because of all that.
Wow, that age stat is crazy. I think age is probably one of the most overlooked. Like, if you could just get an accurate age of every high school prospect, I feel like you could find all sorts of uncovered gems along the way. It's just like you have guys that are older and can contribute early, like Hunter Dickinson or whatever else. But, like, that's a great reason. Like, if you're in the transfer market and Marcus Bingham transfers and you're like, oh, he's actually this old, like, that's just, people don't realize how much that can really affect things. Like, if you evaluated Marcus Bingham like a freshman right now, you'd look at him completely differently, right? So that's fascinating. Can we talk about Michigan State's offense for a sec?
I guess.
Aaron Henry played a great game. He had 20 points. And Michigan State's offense, just, I don't know how this team can, like, flourish offensively. I did a stat in my...
It's proving that it can, right? I mean, at this point, I think that's kind of cemented.
It's just, when you watch them play, especially those late possessions, like, you can really judge an offense late in the game, right? Michigan State would come out of a timeout, they would run a set, and if the set worked, they'd get an easy bucket, right? Or an open shot. There's no ability on this, like, secondary action. Like, if the initial action doesn't work, if you can defend that initial action, it's just sort of a aimless 3-dribble step back jumper from Aaron Henry, who's not a comfortable jump shooter at all, right? There's no ability to create anything after the initial play. And that's, for me, what just really stands out. And especially in a close game down the stretch, I just don't know where you go to get that. And Henry even made some tough shots and, like, did okay in that regard, but he doesn't look confident doing any of that. It's tough. And Rocket Watts doesn't look like that guy. Joey Hauser doesn't look like that guy. So that for me is what really stands out when you watch this team on offense right now.
So what do you think is the root of it? Or is it just a combination of all the things, right? They don't have a natural point guard. They're not a particularly great passing team, even for all the assist stats and all that bullshit. Like, how many times do you see somebody make a great pass that puts someone in position for just a layup or just an easy play, right? Like, it rarely happens. They don't have any 3-point shooters that really warrant, like, sticking to them. So your spacing's never, you don't have to step out against the perimeter. Is it all that combination of all those things, or is it one thing that you'd point to?
Well, what do you do late in a possession? You give the ball to your point guard, or you get the ball in the post, right? Like, those are the two primary ways you make a play outside of a set. And there's just not someone on the roster that's comfortable creating either for themselves or other people in those spots. Like, Michigan State's assists come from good offense. They don't come from one guy breaking down his man and then making a great pass. Like, it's good to run great stuff and get a lot of assisted field goals, but I just don't see the option late in the clock. And that is going to be the issue. I'm not really sure what it is, right? Like it was supposed to be Rocket Watts. It's supposed to be Aaron Henry. I think Aaron Henry is the answer, but he sort of has a ceiling for how well he can play in that role, I think.
Right, and you need so much out of him. Like it's hard to ask him to do both, right? Be a primary creator and a primary scorer. And he took 19 shots last night, which at this point is about right. That might sound crazy, but who else do you want taking shots on this team? The other game, Langford takes 16 shots. Like that's just, I don't think that's what you're looking for. You could probably get a few more than you're getting out of a Joey Hauser. Maybe one or two or three more out of a Malik Hall, guys like that. You probably want Gabe Brown getting up 4 threes a game. But other than that, it's got to be Aaron Henry.
Yeah, and to me, all this manifests itself. So the stats I had in my Big Ten post, basically Michigan State is getting the fewest shot attempts at the rim, which speaks to me a lack of transition and then a lack of being able to get to the basket off the bounce. And it's not just that they're not getting those shots. Their field goal percentage at the rim this year in the Big Ten is 47%. It was only under 58% once in the last 9 years before that. So basically, Michigan State has always done a magnificent job of creating those easy buckets at the basket, and this team just can't do it. And I think that's going to limit the ceiling all the way. I think the defense just has to stick and then hope you find something. One of the answers has seemed to be more shots for Josh Langford, and that doesn't really seem to be something I would bet on as a long-term answer. I don't know.
So coming up, it's Iowa this weekend at home, then back-to-back road games through the old Hoosier State, Purdue, and then Indiana. It's probably you're looking at 2-1. Yeah, you basically have to figure out a way to go 2-1 in these three to continue to at least feel like you're potentially playing for something, right?
And to be honest, those three teams shouldn't be good enough to just run. Like Michigan State should be able to be competitive in those games.
I agree.
Purdue doesn't blow anyone out. Indiana has almost as many offensive issues as Michigan State.
Michigan State had Purdue beat earlier this year. Michigan State arguably had Iowa basically down to the wire earlier this year, and Indiana's Indiana.
So I mean, they would be great wins. They'll be underdogs, but I think it's not like you're looking at, like if it was Illinois back-to-back, like Illinois like is a team that's actually good enough to just beat the shit out of you. Iowa's not playing well. I don't know. You got to look at that as an opportunity, in my opinion. Like this is sort of the lifeline you're going to get before you have Illinois and Ohio State back-to-back. So that's like, if you were playing Illinois and Ohio State right now, I'd be a little worried, but I don't know. Iowa at home seems like a decent chance to, hey, let's go out and do this thing. We know we could play with them. We just did it. What was that? 12 days ago, something like that. So I don't know.
To me, the question is if Michigan State can get to 9 wins in the league. If they can get to 9, I don't think it's out of the question that they're in. Their numbers would be fine. The league is going to get a ton of teams, and you have the Izzo factor, right? Like the committee puts this team in when it's a toss-up. Michigan State gets the benefit of the doubt. You just got to get into position to make it a toss-up. So, they're 4-7 in the league right now. They have 8 scheduled games remaining, but there will be, a couple shoehorned in there. The problem is that they might not be ideal, right? It's going to be a second game against Michigan. It'll be
a second game against Indiana.
Right. So, what can you do? You have to find the games. It's kind of the conversation we were just having about Penn State, right? Like you got to win the games that you can win at this point.
Here's the problem. When you start, this is like how do you get to 70 points? How do you get to 9 wins? If you're trying to get to 9 wins, you'd really like to see Nebraska on your schedule twice.
Yeah,
instead, you look back and you see you got to 4 with 2 wins over Nebraska. Mm-hmm. That makes me a little nervous when I'm trying to get to 9. There's no Northwestern. There's Maryland on the road. I mean, that's not like an easy game. So I think it's tough to see every game be well, it's not going to be easy, but maybe we can do it, right? You'd like to have a couple gimmies in there, and there's just not that many in the Big Ten this year. Penn State, that's a good win, but man, it's going to be tough to win, 5 more games to get to 9 wins?
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy.
No, and for the record, I don't think this is happening. I'm just on February 10th, you have to at least, we've seen crazier things than a team like this version of Michigan State figuring out a way to close and find a way into the field.
I think the one thing for the tournament streak that's probably an X factor is whatever the hell happens with the Big Ten tournament.
Mm-hmm.
There could be opportunities there with however those chips fall. And you kind of have a chance to, those games can, even if everyone plays in the Big Ten tournament, every game's going to be a quality win. There's going to be different incentive. Like, who knows? That could be an interesting narrative, because you usually have that one team that wins a couple games and changes everything.
The other factor will be what happens nationally. I think in terms of when you're talking about the bottom of the Big Ten, which is where, Michigan State will end up for better or worse. And when I say bottom, I mean, kind of that NCAA cutoff line. What happens nationally is going to have an effect on those teams, because we still don't know how much space is on the bubble. Does a Gonzaga bail on the West Coast Conference tournament and then somebody steals a bid that shouldn't? Are there going to be more bid stealers than usual just because of circumstances that are totally unique to this season? All this will kind of play into it. That is, do you have anything else on Michigan State?
So the one problem with Michigan State's tournament resume, I'm trying to find their team sheet.
That's quite a statement.
Well, a big problem is the fact that they only have one Q1 win, and that they're 1-6 in Q1 games, and I think the majority of the games they have left on their schedule are going to be Q1 games. So they have opportunities, but they also haven't really done much with those Q1 win or Q1 game opportunities to begin with. So it's not like, it's just, you're going to have to ski uphill to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, to me, I think in terms of making it something that would be palatable for the committee is winning the games that you can win. Purdue, Indiana, Maryland, right? And maybe the second game, at least split with Indiana, but preferably sweep Indiana, pick off Purdue, pick off Maryland. And because I just think playing the numbers, Michigan State's going to win one of the games that it shouldn't win. It will upset somebody in just a weird game just because that's the way these things go. So it'll beat Ohio State, or it'll beat Iowa, or it'll, split with Michigan or something like that. It'll just find a way. But you can't lose those other games. That's the position they put themselves in.
Yeah, and those other games
are not easy.
Aren't should wins. They're right. Could wins.
Could wins. Yeah, on Ken Palm, they're straight L's. So where does that leave you in terms of your expectations? It's hope at this point for the Spartans out there. Michigan, Wisconsin this weekend, hopefully, knock on wood, right?
Yeah.
From having conversations with a number of coaches and people around programs that have had these longer pauses and stuff like that, the only consensus that I've found is that everyone says the first game isn't the problem. The second game's the problem, because that's when the legs go. That's when the conditioning and all these things kind of show themselves. The first game is when you get the juice, right? These guys are just rip-roaring ready to go, and they come out and they play that game, at least physically, right? You might miss shots or whatever, but in terms of your body, the first game's okay. The second game's the drop-off. So we'll see for how Michigan is able to, perform in this one. But I feel like in terms of talking about this game, that's the baseline. It's just, what does this team look like running, jumping, playing basketball again?
It's funny that you say that because after the Michigan State game last night, the Australian Open came on TV, and you know how a bunch of tennis players got hit with like what they're calling a hard quarantine, right? So they were 14 days in their hotel room, and I don't know anything about tennis, but one player who I think lost played in a warm-up tournament and said like the week before and said he couldn't walk for like the whole week after playing 2 matches in that tournament, and he was completely dead for the actual tournament. So that was a big mistake. So I do think that speaks to what you're saying, where
Interesting.
the initial game you'll be fine, and then it'll be the recovery from the initial game that actually is what really kills you. I think the bigger issues in the initial game would be, how do we run offense? Like, are things in sync? Are we making shots? So it's like those things will be issues immediately. But as far as fitness, I think you could probably get through a game. It's just you hit the wall and you're like, oh man, we got to get to practice the next day. I'm dead here, man. I haven't done that in a long time. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And I hadn't actually even thought of it like that, but it really does make sense from a recovery standpoint. I think the big issue for Michigan, though, is that they're going to play a Wisconsin team that desperately kind of needs to get back on track and will be hungry to win that game. So that's a tough spot. Like, you'd much rather open back up with Nebraska or whatever else. Wisconsin has been – you're probably ready to take a victory lap on Wisconsin after you said they can't shoot the ball as well as they did at the end of last year. But what's crazy to me is they shot the ball really well over the first 2 months of the season. They just gone completely cold. They were up at like 40% from 3. Now they're down at 30% over the last 8 games. To me, I think that's dangerous for everyone that plays Wisconsin over the last month of the season, because they're going to get hot eventually. And right as everyone is saying, oh, Wisconsin sucks, like they're not any good, I think they're going to go and they're going to win a few games in a row at some point. You just don't want to be the team that catches them when they're hot.
Well, what's most dangerous for Michigan and everyone else is that Wisconsin has the ultimate elixir coming up here tonight.
The Huskers?
Nothing like a game against Nebraska to go find your stroke, right?
I would say Iowa is the ultimate elixir to find your offense. I mean, Nebraska just really mucked up that game against Michigan State, so maybe they're figuring out their defense a bit.
Well, that's fair, but I feel like
it's a good get-right game.
Right. You're right. The ultimate elixir is the Fran.
The Iowa zone.
So, everything I've seen from Wisconsin is just the jarring thing is you're so used to seeing like the constants and the consistency that you feel like you get with Wisconsin. And to me, it's like game to game, you don't know what you're getting. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see Wisconsin go and look really good against Nebraska tonight and have a drop off immediately against Michigan. Like there isn't this game to game continuity. And I feel like it's because they've been themselves looking for what they're supposed to be for a while now. Right.
Yeah. And I think in the first meeting between Michigan and Wisconsin, Michigan played really well defensively. And I think that
I barely remember that.
It was just they suffocated them defensively, and that kind of started this Wisconsin downturn where they haven't been able to find themselves again. But I do think the matchup set up pretty favorably, where Wisconsin doesn't really have Michigan's length really bothered them, and I don't think there's an easy way to offset that from a Wisconsin standpoint, right? Like the size inside, like the things Wisconsin wants to do, Michigan sets up well to guard. So that gives Michigan a bit of a floor, but man, I just don't know how you can even predict how Michigan will shoot it. It's just a crazy situation all around.
Have you watched Wisconsin of late? Have you sat down and watched the full game?
I watched the Illinois game. When was that? That was this weekend, right?
I'd be kind of curious if you've seen any difference in how they're using Potter and Reavers now versus the first time Michigan played them.
I mean, they don't play together anymore. So
at all.
Reavers is coming off the bench,
right?
And then Potter's starting. They're going small. They're basically splitting the minutes, and they've kind of got Reavers back on track a bit, but they can't get both of them playing well at the same time. And I'm not really sure what the long-term answer there, because it's really you get something from Trice, but then you have Wall, Davison, Ford, Jonathan Davis. Like, those guys are all bodies. They're all able to defend and do some different things. They'll shoot 3-point shots, but they haven't been particularly consistent. None of them are dynamic enough to really go and get their own. So it's basically the one guy who can create his shot is Trice. Mm-hmm. And then you have to deal with Micah Potter and the pick and pop, and then he'll sit for half the game. So you only have to deal with it for 20 minutes. So it's just I don't know where you go with that if you're Wisconsin. You have to lean into something. I think I would like to see Micah Potter play 30 minutes. I think that would make them the best team, but he doesn't seem like he's ever going to get to that point.
Yeah. And with Michigan, kind of my working theory on them coming back has been the biggest benefit is their age, that it's an old group that I feel like mentally would remain as engaged as you would hope for in pretty much impossible circumstances, right? Like, what people need to realize is these guys were doing Zoom workouts in their apartments. Like, that's what the last 2 weeks consisted of. I'm sure some of the guys found an outdoor rim or something to shoot at, but they were not in the facilities.
An outdoor rim. It's
oh yeah, it's covered in snow.
20 degrees, man. What are you talking about? It's not.
Maybe. Is there a covered thing anywhere? I don't know. I would hope somebody found something.
Nick Stauskas over here.
There you go. That's right. Shovel it off.
I don't think they were doing much outdoor shooting.
If you can go shoot birds, you can go shoot buckets, right?
All right, Austin Davis. I don't know.
But my point is that, we have talked about the experience and age of this team. It is a bunch of old guys who I feel like even in the approach to this season, have a rather adult, right? Kind of professional-ish approach to these things. And I imagine that is how this quarantine, this whatever you want to call it, has been handled in comparison to, their college contemporaries.
Yeah, I just can't imagine cardiovascularly how you come back. Zoom workouts fine. You can use resistance bands or whatever else, but you can't really get any real cardio in a college apartment. You can try doing your lecture while you stand up and see how that goes, but I don't think that's really going to get you in peak shape to go play basketball again. I just do you think there's any benefit long term to wear and tear is this an actual recovery period that could benefit you later in the year, or is it just going to all be burnt on playing 11 games in 20 days or whatever they end up doing?
I would, if I had to just completely guess, and I have zero idea, I would think the latter.
Yeah. The scheduling crunch will be really interesting in how it's handled, how many games you make up, because you basically could be looking at a situation where Michigan's playing a game every 3 days for the next 4 weeks or whatever till the end of the season. That's a lot of wear and tear before you go and you play a Big Ten tournament and then you go to the NCAA tournament. Does that?
I would still be surprised if they get 11 games in 22 days.
You would be surprised if they played 11, which would get. So I'm saying, but even if they reschedule 2 or 3 games, they're going to be playing every 3 days. So I don't have the exact math, but I think it's still a lot of games and not a lot of time. And it's still multiple weeks where you're probably playing Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, which is something you would never do really in a normal season.
Yeah, and they're going to have to. I'm sure they will go in here with a game plan of, you're going to see some lineups that are going to be a matter of circumstance and not a matter of situation in the game. You're going to have to play Zeb Jackson a little bit more. You're going to have to play Terrence Williams a little more. You're going to have to play Brandon Johns a little more. You can't be playing guys, right? 33, 34 minutes a game right now. It's not worth it. Because if you drop a couple, so be it. But you have to just have your eyes on March, and you just can't burn out Franz's legs, right? Isaiah Livers' legs. I wonder what the level of concern would be with Isaiah Livers, considering his hamstrings issues in the past and coming back from a break like this.
So what, if you say you are Juwan Howard, what are you emphasize, like, are you going all out? Like, how much do you prioritize health for the NCAA tournament, winning the Big Ten, all of that, right? Like, it's a pretty fine line. If you think back to I think this was before you got here, but the 2012 Michigan team that ended up winning the Big Ten or sharing it in the regular season, that team completely burned itself out chasing that down essentially over the final 3 weeks of the season, and then they turn around and lose to Ohio in the first round. I think that's a risk, and that's something you have to consider in this circumstance. But I guess it's really going to kind of flex based on how some of these games go, based on what you really need to do to have a chance to win the Big Ten. I don't know. It's going to be fascinating.
Personally, especially given the makeup of this team, all of my focus would be on the NCAA tournament, because you get one shot at this of having a group like Franz, Isaiah Livers, Hunter Dickinson, and the senior transfers all on the team at once, right? Like, this thing goes into, Michigan might still be good next year, but it goes into you're starting over next season. You get one shot with this exact group. And right now, this team is good enough to go to the Final Four. So that has to, in my opinion, right? Big Ten championships, obviously huge, but this team can go to the Final Four. So that needs to be your focus.
Yeah, I think you look at it right now, there are two teams that are clearly better than Michigan. I think anyone can debate who the third best team is in the country, and Michigan's in that mix. So you only have so many times that you have a team that's good enough to get to the Final Four on paper. So I do agree that has to be kind of where you start. Also, though, you don't know if there's going to be a whole NCAA tournament. You don't know what could happen. Like, do you prioritize trying to win the banner that might actually be given out, right? Like, it's just such a weird situation all around. You did a lot of reporting regarding kind of how the Big Ten is going to handle all this. It sounds like, I guess the big takeaways from your story, correct me if I'm wrong, the first one was makeup games will prioritize teams that haven't played each other yet.
Correct. And
winning percentage will probably be used to determine the Big Ten regular season champion.
Correct. And the possibility of canceling and teams opting out has not even been addressed or discussed internally. Like, the Big Ten is
of the Big Ten tournament.
Yes, it's only all systems go. There's the only real conversation was moving it from Chicago to Indy. The idea of teams opting out is not even a thing. Like, I even asked for, and I haven't heard back, but like, I asked, is there anything in the bylaws or anything from the Big Ten about if a team doesn't want to participate in its own conference tournament? They were like, well, we don't even know. So I'm still waiting to hear back on that. But point being, like, anyone that's still thinking that there's a chance the Big Ten tournament is canceled, it's not going to be canceled. Yeah. Unless barring, right, 5 teams on pause, 6 teams on pause, something crazy happening COVID wise, whatever it may be, that would prompt you having to kind of blow the thing up. But they're not just going to do it for the sake of doing it.
I guess the question is, does a team like Michigan or Illinois pause for an abundance of caution the week of the Big Ten tournament? And they're not opting out, but they're like, oh, well, maybe I don't know. You know what I mean? You could use COVID in that light to say, oh, we're just being extra careful, which would be completely honest and smart in some ways. So there's still a Big Ten tournament. Everyone else plays. It happens, but that could happen, I would say. And that's probably how it would happen if it goes down. It's not going to be like, we just don't want to play. It's going to be some sort of carefully worded press release.
Right. But to your first point, right. As of now, I think you talk to people in around the league, they think they're right. The goal was 140 to get to 140 conference games. They're probably going to end up at 135, give or take, right? Michigan's going to be one of the teams that doesn't have. Michigan, Nebraska are probably going to be the teams that come up short.
Yeah, I don't see how you can get to 20 with the number of days left on the calendar and the number of games Michigan has to play.
Right. I mean, forget the fact that it's probably unreasonable to ask a team to play 11 games in 22 days. It's also just logistically finding the holes in the schedule, finding the days, finding all of the dominoes that need to fall in order to get one game to be played. Like, it is not just pencil shit in on a calendar because two teams have open dates. You need facilities. You need TV times. You need officials to be available. Like, there's a lot that goes into these things. I thought one of the interesting things that was in the story was, I think he said 20 to 30, it's like 20 to 30 calls to get, maybe one game rescheduled. And even those dates are still tentative, even when they're like, okay, this works. So there's a lot that goes into it. And yeah, just based on that alone, I think 11 games in 22 days is not going to happen. I could be wrong. Don't get me wrong. Like I could be wrong, but it just seems unfeasible.
Yeah. Just looking at the numbers and the other schedules, Michigan getting to 18 seems possible, right? Yeah. 20 seems impossible. I just don't see how you can get there. From your conversations and just reporting that story, how much say do the teams have, right? Like, can Michigan be like, we're not comfortable playing that many games in that many days? What does that conversation look like from what you gather?
Yeah, I mean, the Big Ten, it is not a mandate of we have this game, we have created it for you, you have to go play it. Both teams have their say in the matter. Yeah, I don't think Michigan is not just going to trot out if they're not comfortable with them playing, they're not going to play. And the league can't make them. So, it could it create some friction? Yeah, possibly, but I think at the end of the day, everyone understands the circumstances that they're talking about. And it really does the league no good to, put a team in any level of risk. Like, I don't really think that that's a thing. If Michigan's not comfortable with it, if their medical people are not down with it, then it won't happen.
Yeah. So it'll be really interesting. And I assume these dates will kind of start filling in here over the next few weeks. I thought it was interesting that Illinois put out a bunch of updated games, and they have not yet rescheduled the Michigan game. So there's going to be a lot of moving pieces here, I'd say. And I also think that you can't look like Michigan's game at Penn State that was originally canceled or postponed was then rescheduled for a date someone else was going to reschedule. So these things are all so fluid. I think even you'll see an update and you'll see Michigan's going to play these games, and then they could all change. So I think you have to be ready to embrace chaos here over the next 3 weeks, because it's going to be pretty chaotic. But I also think you have to look like Nebraska had a Monday, Wednesday, Saturday stretch or something like that. Like, there's going to be, I think the Big Ten showed they're not afraid to schedule games in a situation that maybe we haven't seen before, right? Yeah. No, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday for Nebraska. That's insane.
Yeah. And I mean, Kerry Kenny had no problem answering, right on the record that there's likely either some back-to-backs and some 2 and 3 day situations at single sites. Like, you're probably going to see that.
Do you think we will see Michigan plays Indiana twice in Bloomington?
I think so. Like, I don't know if that will be the exact example, but I do think you'll see it at least once. I think it makes sense. I don't know why. Like, if you're trying to do this, that seems like one of the safest way to do it, right? You want to minimize travel. You want to maximize your ability to test at the highest level. Why wouldn't you do that? I mean, personally, I don't know if you shot it down or not. Some people weren't into it, but I like the idea of Michigan State just playing March 6th, March 7th, home and away.
Yeah, that has to happen.
But as much of it is, for me, I think the benefit for the teams is scouting. If you're being asked to play this many games in close dates, well, it makes it a shit ton easier if you're only talking about one scout. So you might as well bunch these as much as you can.
Yeah, it's one thing to play Sunday, Tuesday against two different teams. It's something else to play against the same team twice. You just run it back and have the same sort of deal. From what we've seen now, though, I know Wisconsin and Penn State kind of did that, but that was a home and home, right? So we haven't seen them go off track from the Big Ten schedule, basically, to have a team play another team twice away. That would seem like a line to cross in a way, because it throws off the balance of the whole schedule. But again, if Michigan's playing 18 games, there's a chance they could already have an uneven number of home and away games. So maybe you actually need that to balance it out. So who knows? It's going to be complicated. There's going to be a lot of screaming about the Big Ten title race. I can already kind of see that.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about that.
I saw someone suggest that multiple people will claim a Big Ten title. There's only one you can't just claim it. There's going to be you get a trophy, right? It's not a
don't tell that to Central Florida. Don't tell that to Central Florida.
All right. Well, what is your take on all that?
No, I'm curious what you think about. I don't see how you can look. This year's champion will probably have an asterisk, whether it's real or imagined. Like, that's just the reality of it. I don't see how you can come up with any other measuring system than win percentage. I mean, it's just in an imbalanced schedule. What else do you do? Nothing is ideal. So it's not going to be fair in air quotes, but it's never fair because the league doesn't play. The league doesn't play round robin. So whatever, it's just a more dramatic version of what you should be used to by now.
Yeah, I think it has to be winning percentage, which is gonna. What I'm curious is how aggressively teams, like, if it's winning percentage and you're Illinois, you want to play Nebraska again. You don't want to play Michigan, right? Like, so does the gamesmanship come into the games that actually get scheduled, which would be like, it'd be bullshit if Michigan and Illinois don't find a way to play. They have to figure out how to schedule that game. And I'm confident they will.
No way. I feel like the bare minimum that you will see is that every team in the league will play once. That's like their baseline. You have to get it done. So that will happen, right? And then I think then what's the next priority? Okay, so then let's say the next priority is probably in the case of Michigan State, it's a protected rivalry. You want to play those two teams. They want to play them twice, right? And it's a big TV game. So they're gonna find a way to make that second game happen somewhere, right? If the Michigan-Penn State makeup game or Indiana maybe even falls by the wayside, so be it. But even Michigan-Indiana, that's a good TV game. I think they're going to try to make that one happen,
Here's the issue, though, with makeup games for Michigan. Their last 5 games are all teams they haven't played yet. So you don't have a ton of room to move stuff around because those games all have to happen, right?
Right. So yeah, when we're talking about Illinois as a makeup game, like, they don't have another game against they have games against teams that they haven't played yet, but they're already scheduled. So if those games get knocked out, now it really gets fucked up. But the Illinois game is the only non-scheduled game against a team it hasn't played yet.
Exactly.
Right. So
that has to be a priority, but I think the best gap for it would be probably like Thursday, the 25th.
Right.
Because that's that week. It would mean Illinois is playing tight game, but I think Michigan will probably end up playing 2 games that week too, between those Ohio State and Indiana games. So that'll be interesting. It's easy to look at the schedule and start cramming in double headers on a weekend, but then also cramming in Tuesday, Thursday games. And I feel like you can't really do both. So they'll have to figure out how to balance that, I think, because it's unfair to ask, like if you're going to play a game on a Monday and then Thursday and then play a double game against Michigan State that weekend, that seems like overkill. So who knows? It should be fun to watch it all play out. The Big Ten race is, I think, getting kind of good here. We have some actual contenders. Ohio State is on a tear.
What kind of advantage do you think the teams that have just been completely unaffected schedule-wise for the most part of all this, like Rutgers hasn't had a game canceled, Wisconsin hasn't had a game canceled, Ohio State hasn't had a game canceled. Do you think that's anything, or is that something or nothing?
I mean, I guess get back to me after we see what the hell Michigan looks like after a break, right? It's hard to really say because no good team has had a shutdown like Michigan's, like, of the contenders, as far like maybe a game or two here or there, but like Michigan's the only contender that's had any sort of real shutdown, right? Is that, I think?
Well, yeah, but I mean, Illinois is the weirdest outlier because it has 3 games canceled, but none of it by its own. Like, they happen to have had, right? The main issues in the league have been Michigan, Michigan State, Nebraska, Penn State. Mm-hmm. Illinois, just by happenstance, had their games against Nebraska, Michigan State, and Michigan all in those windows. So they've had 3 games postponed through no fault of their own. And I don't mean fault in that, right? No, it's no one's fault when you have a situation, but through, Illinois hasn't been the reason for its own postponements.
Can we go back and talk about how dumb it was for Michigan to play one game between December 13th and December 31st? Like, yeah, that huge, I get it's finals and whatever else, but they shouldn't have been idle for that long. And you could have played more Big Ten games there. It just made no sense to have huge gaps in the schedule early in the season when it's crazy to me. They should be like 2 or 3 games ahead of where they are, and then you would have a lot less work to do scheduling down the stretch. So that still annoys me. Like, why did we play?
I don't even remember the reasoning for it. Do you?
I assume it was to play on Christmas, right? Remember, they played on December 13th, then they played on Christmas and New Year's. You could have easily came up with some way to play more games in December, and I think that was a mistake because other Big Ten teams were playing games a lot of those dates. It was just strange scheduling all around. Still pisses me off.
Yeah, not ideal for sure.
It's also crazy. We're talking about Michigan and how they're 8-1, they're way ahead in winning percentage. You start to look at how the standings are playing out, and Michigan really hasn't played any of the top teams other than that one game against Wisconsin. So a lot of swing games here coming out in the stretch with Illinois, Ohio State. They still have to play Iowa, still have to play Rutgers, still have to play Indiana. The teams that Michigan beat up on have settled pretty comfortably into the bottom half of the Big Ten.
Michigan has 1 win in the top 20 of KenPom, 2 wins in the top 30.
Yeah. So big test coming up, and like it'll be hard to parse out, oh, this is because Michigan was shut down, or oh, like Michigan actually hadn't played a lot of great games.
Right.
So that'll be interesting. And we're going to start finding out real quick here, hopefully on Sunday.
Very good. Are you coming up
to Madison?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be in Madison.
Rutgers next week.
I'm not going to be in Madison.
You coming up for Rutgers?
Most likely not. No.
No? Okay. All right. I was hoping to see you, bud.
That's sweet.
What are your feelings on the NCAA? Before we get out of here, what are your general thoughts on the NCAA tournament as of we're 5 weeks from Selection Sunday in terms of what it looks like? Do you think, like, how positive are you that we get across the finish line?
I just hope it happens.
Listen to the fear in your voice.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're doing all this, playing a season this way to have the tournament. I think they definitely could have taken more precautions to maybe safeguard themselves from things going wrong. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, right? Like, it's great to have a seating chart for how people are going to bust to Indianapolis, but maybe we should have a longer quarantine period before everyone plays, knowing the risks that could happen. It seems like there'll definitely be teams that test positive and just have to at least have players kicked out of the tournament. I'm really curious what rules apply. Like, so the Big Ten has testing rules. The SEC has other testing rules. The Big Ten has like a 21 or 17-day quarantine for someone that tests positive. I'm really I don't know what rules apply. And I think that'll be interesting because if you read some of the policies they've outlined as far as like, they're clearly trying to distance people, I assume, for contact tracing and whatever else, but every state is different for that. Does that affect the outcome of the tournament, or is everyone agreeing to play by the NCAA's rules, which I assume will be to minimize disruption to an extent? I don't know. That's what I'm most curious about.
Yeah. I agree. And I still haven't heard anything about fans. Have you?
No, I haven't seen anything official, about that.
Well,
I would assume
something to look out for our listeners. As of now, I'm scheduled to have David Warlock on my podcast with Nick next Wednesday.
Cross promotion,
right?
That's good stuff.
Bad. Yeah. I think that should be a pretty interesting conversation. David Warlock's he's basically oversees a lot of aspects of the NCAA tournament, and he will have whatever answers can be said publicly. He will be one to have them. So, and he'll be coming off. I think they have the bracket preview show on Saturday or Sunday.
Yeah,
this
I think
weekend.
that's this weekend.
So check that out. I think our listeners would be interested in that. Yeah.
How confident are you in what you've seen from the NCAA tournament plan?
I feel like, barring a national issue that is beyond prediction or anything, which we're all quite accustomed to by now, they're getting this thing across the finish line. I just don't see how you come this far to turn back in any way, barring, like I said, something severe and changing in the national picture.
If you have a team like a top 4 seed,
that's going to happen.
Game with COVID,
it's going to happen.
Just gonna taint the whole thing, in my opinion. That's the hardest part, like how they handle that,
and that's everything this year, right? Like Big Ten standings are going to be messed up, and there's going to be people for years to come are going to talk about whoever wins the championship this year as an asterisk, and everything in the tournament. There are going to be COVID issues. I don't see how it doesn't happen. Whether that's teams that are able to play, whatever. My question is going to be if they are going to have any kind of contingency. And this is a question for Dave Warlock, right? A team makes it into the bracket and doesn't make it to Indy. They replacing them with the next team on the seed line. It has to be that, I would assume. How does that work? Like, are they going to, do you bunker off your first 4 teams out in case they have to slide into the tournament field? What do you do? Right.
Yeah. And what if it's like do you change matchups? Like, what if it's a 3 seed that goes out with COVID? Do you move? Like, do you bring in another? It's going to be crazy. Michigan, for me, the huge risk is that they have for what's been reported, one player who's tested positive for COVID in the last year, or 6 months or whatever. That's a huge risk. Whereas other teams, like Michigan's been shut down without positives, and that's really gonna it's like Michigan State. If they make the tournament, there's not that many people on a team that are a risk to catch COVID.
Put it this way: Michigan State, Nebraska the other night, right? Thomas Kithier gets sick in the game, and they have fear. All right, okay. Oh shit, he says he's not feeling well. You got to isolate him. You got to test guys. Blah blah. Look, they didn't call off the game in part because, right? Okay, well, you've already gone far enough as it is. Like, you finish the game, but also between Nebraska and Michigan State, like, and I'm not like trying to make light of this or all, but like, damn near everyone in both tier 1 groups for both programs have already had it. So you automatically are going to feel more comfortable just going ahead with it. If you're Michigan and Michigan State comes to you at halftime, if Michigan's playing Michigan State and a Michigan State administrator comes over to Michigan and says, Thomas Kithier isn't feeling well, and
you got to think about walking.
You have to think about leaving the gym immediately.
And Michigan is the unique team in this sense, right? Like, across college basketball, there are far more teams in the situation of Michigan State and Nebraska than in Michigan's situation. I would say pretty confidently, like, Michigan's in the minority as far as just like completely dodging COVID throughout the year. And that it's not really, it's a risky position to be in. And I mean, also they've been mature enough to handle it as they've gone. You can't control everything, but obviously they've done a good job following whatever policies are in place. But as the season goes on and you see like the UNC thing, you see this story?
With the players partying.
The players and the managers partying, and Miami called the game. Like, those are decisions that Michigan's going to have to make along the way in a situation if that sort of thing comes up, and that's just the inherent risk. Like, the bubble could breach in the NCAA tournament with 1 or 2 teams just like sneaking out of their hotel or who knows what, right? So it's going to be, because it's not a true bubble. It's just going to be a risky situation all the time, and everyone's just going to be kind of biting their nails to get to the finish line, I feel like.
I agree. You just have to like prepare for as many possible scenarios as you can, but even that's impossible. So, all right, that'll do it for this week. We appreciate everyone listening. If you'd be so kind to leave us a review in the App Store. I checked recently. We've had 3 reviews in the 2021 calendar year. I think we can do better than that, folks. So jump in there and share some words if you'd be so willing. Share this with your friends. We're almost to March. This is our time. And subscribe, most importantly.
Hopefully the next podcast, we can talk about both Michigan and Michigan State playing a game. I feel like it's been a long time since we had a pod where both teams played. But maybe there's one game of overlap there. But either way, that'd be exciting.
What would that be? Monday morning?
Yeah, let's get after it.
Fingers crossed. All right, everyone. Be safe out there. Take care of each other, and be sure to tip your bartenders and servers.